The Forum 2, exclusively on YouTube Live, weekdays from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. We tackle the tough issues: political, social, cultural, and racial. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. Check out our website, theforum2.com. Call in live 414 395 0484. Check us out. Good Monday morning to you all. November 9th, 2020. And so that's it. Joe Biden is the winner, even though there are a number of recounts that will likely happen. None of them will be able to swing the election back toward Donald Trump, but that's not going to stop the president. And I'm going to tell you what, let's go ahead and let him do that. He's even planning a series of campaign-style rallies to drum up more support for the recount effort. You know what I say to that? Let him do it. Now, if you live in one of the cities that the president plans to come to with his I just lost the election campaign rally tour, please mask up. Please be careful. But we're not going to be able to stop crowds from gathering to support Donald Trump, even in defeat. But we also need to be very cautious of that fact as well. And I'm going to talk about that later on in the program, because Donald Trump is going to be a Republican kingmaker for a very long time, up to and maybe through the 2024 presidential election. But if he's still going to have campaign style rallies to try and get more support and resources for a recount that is not going to amount in really much of anything except for more coronavirus cases, let them go ahead and do it. God will sort them out. And I hate to have to be so callous with them, but they were so callous with us. Do you want to talk about the issue that will probably be front and center of how Democrats plan to govern in an America that did not give universal victories across the board to Democrats, even though 75 million people voted for the Biden-Harris ticket? And let me take a moment and congratulate them, congratulate you for all of your hard work. For those that were celebrating in the streets, they were ringing church bells in Paris. Oh, it was a beautiful moment. It really was. But I want to give you my perspective on it. And for those that were celebrating and were jubilant and were dancing in the streets, y'all gave me life, because that is what I wanted to see in this country again. And I'm so glad that the results, and they keep getting better. As more votes get counted, it's going to put Joe Biden even further out of reach of Donald Trump. That in and of itself is a moment to celebrate. But for me specifically, I wasn't out there in the streets. And I know that I probably should have been, as much as I've talked about it, as long as I've waited for the moment of Election Day 2020. The way I looked at it, as someone who has covered the Trump administration just about every single day of the last 4 years, my mind did not have the ability to wrap itself around Donald Trump getting reelected. So from the election results of 2016, from that moment forward, I was committed every single day of my life to do whatever was necessary, to have the conversations, to raise money, to donate money, to get involved in local politics, to help local leaders get elected. So once they crossed the threshold and became an elected official, they could help push a democratic message to different pieces and corners of our community. I was just so incredibly buried in that work that my mind would not let itself wrap itself around 4 more years of Donald Trump. For me, it was just inconceivable. So when Trump lost and is still continuing to lose, it just was what I was expecting, because my mind was not able to even comprehend the fact that he could possibly get reelected. And so when you've been thinking about something for so long and so fixated on a particular outcome in which there was no compromise, for me personally, and I know for a lot of you, there was no compromise of Donald Trump getting reelected. And so when he lost, I was like, okay, good, let's get to work. He was a major inconvenience for 4 years. and we can begin to rebuild. And one of the ways the Democrats can begin to rebuild is to have a very strong coalition doing battle with Republicans that won state houses, that still may be hanging on to a majority in the US Senate, even though Donald Trump traveling the country and bringing more attention on him is going to take away from the Republicans' ability to bring more attention on the recounts in Georgia. So that's why I say if Trump wants to go out there and have all the attention on him, let him. We got work to do in Georgia in which we can just take this majority back from the Republicans in the US Senate. And so at some point in time, Donald Trump is going to realize that he is going to be taking time and resources and attention away from those Georgia runoffs, and he probably will stop and then change midstream to help those Republicans in Georgia, but we'll see. But the topic that I want to have a conversation on and also get some of your input and feedback on is how moderate Democrats, which I am one of, and proud to say that I am, I still believe in the ability to work with people that you may have fundamental disagreements with, because life is about striking a compromise. As uncomfortable and inconvenient as that is, you're never going to get everything you want all of the time. My parents taught me that. I grew up with that philosophy. You're going to lose some. You're going to win some, but you got to be okay with losing some too. But at least you're there to fight another day. Things are not always going to be fair. We can see every single piece and portion of what is deficient in America, and no one is better equipped to understand where America is deficient than someone with black or brown skin. We get it. We know. And if anything, we should be less patient than anybody else. But we also know you only have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of energy to accomplish as much as you possibly can. And I know that this is not satisfying to those that want to see a completely different America. And the encouragement that they're receiving right now from a Joe Biden and a Kamala Harris election victory means that we can just go ahead and implement the perfect Democratic progressive agenda. We forget that Republicans are still in the room and they have increased their footholds in state legislatures, which means they're going to redistrict the boundaries of legislative districts again, even worse than they did in 2010, because now they have a firm U.S. Supreme Court. If it does nothing else, it will make sure that the unconstitutional maps the Republicans plan to draw with this short census count are going to be even more gerrymandered than what we've been suing to get out of for the last 10 years. Speaking of which, there were a variety of court cases brought by Democrats and Democratic-leaning organizations all over the country to redraw the maps. To the best of my knowledge, maps were only redrawn in two places, and it took 10 years to get these maps redrawn, and it was 2 congressional seats in North Carolina. And those are 2 seats that Democrats recently picked up. In fact, just a week ago, they picked up these 2 seats because a judge in a court ruled that these particular congressional district maps were so gerrymandered they had to redraw the maps. And look what happened when they redrew the maps. Democrats won. But I need you to know, it took 10 years to pick up those 2 seats from redrawn maps. A decade. There are 435 seats in Congress. And with suing to try and get fairer maps, the Democrats only picked up 2 seats in a full decade. So we got to be mindful of that. I wouldn't say that there's a Republican mandate, but as more data becomes abundantly clear, we're going to get into racial data. Right now, all we have are exit polls. As time goes on, the data will get much more specific as to exactly what the hell were people thinking when they went out and they voted. Like, what was on their minds? This was a referendum against Donald Trump as a leader, not as a Republican, as a leader of America, but a Republican agenda that thoroughly rejects whatever its narrow and often incorrect and ignorant definition of socialism is. America rejected that. And so it is not a grand victory for the ultimate Democratic wish list. The difficult part is we are going to have to strike a compromise with Republicans later. We compromise with them later. We compromise with them in conference committee. We compromise with them on, funding measures and on budgets. We're not worried. We're not ready to compromise with them yet. Right now, it's all about us. We have to figure out how Democrats, as a united front, that got 75 million total votes, and that number is going up. We're about 92% of all of the precincts in America counting. And when we count some of those, Chicago precincts and Illinois precincts, already blue states, when they count every single last one of their votes, it is going to be more votes for Joe Biden, but also more votes for Donald Trump. We have to have a unified front because the Republicans are more dug in than ever because they see the writing is on the wall. The only thing the Republicans lost was the presidency. They literally won everything else, including the U.S. Supreme Court. And so for Democrats to be this impenetrable, united front going against that is extremely important. It is a specific set of issues that will make this more difficult for Democrats because what we're showing America and how Democrats can work together, whether you're a Democratic socialist, a moderate, a conservative Democrat, whatever flavor of Democrat you are, this is going to show the country what our brand of leadership is going into the midterm elections of 2022, which are going to be terrible for us. We're going to get shellacked unless we get it together right now. So I want to read you guys some details from what the actual progressive agenda is. And I'll be the first one to say a lot of it is really good. A lot of it can be implemented yesterday. But where it gets implemented and where a progressive agenda can bear fruit is different from the perception of it. First, let me say good morning, everybody, on this joyous Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, waking up in a new America Monday morning. Eileen Seeger, good morning to you. Best damn Monday I've had in a very long time, she says. Miss Dream Johnson, good morning. Sarah Laguerre, glad you're here with us. Haywood Beeman says good morning. Vanessa Garrett, good morning. To see you and everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. Likewise, Gail Williams. Good morning, all. Let's exhale slowly and savor the day for now. Denise Jones. Good morning, people. It's a glorious Monday morning. There's still work to be done. Rise up, people. Flynn says, I've been looking forward to hearing from you all weekend. Thank you, Flynn. Happy Monday to you too. G. Collins, good morning, Sherwin and all. Ronald Gergen, you helped me get through the past 4 years. I will keep listening. Thank you, Ronald. I appreciate that. I couldn't have any other outcome. I couldn't accept it. There was no way. I dedicated way too much time, and so did you, to making sure we didn't get a repeat of 2016 because we learned those lessons quick. Immediately, it was a referendum and a relitigating of Hillary Clinton's campaign. And I said, okay, well, here's where we screwed it up. Let's get it back together. And I knew that we could win. I knew some of you guys didn't know. Some Republican voters were thoroughly convinced, even right now, that Donald Trump won. But can we just be honest, though, for a second? Because they are our fellow Americans with a sprinkle of Nazi. Their math is not their strong suit. So for them thinking that anything involving the math of votes and electoral college votes is going to go their way, they don't know any better. A couple of Republicans are going to start coming out. Mitt Romney had kind of a lukewarm response. Even Chris Christie, who got COVID from the Trump administration. He's like, well, you got to show us some evidence of voter fraud, Donald. Please, he's like begging, please show us something. We can't just support you blindly. There won't be any evidence of voter fraud. Can I thank the post office, though, real quick? I know some of y'all, I don't really know how you guys feel about the post office, but I grew up in a family. Like, the post office is where my parents met and worked and were retired and were members of a union. So I grew up in a post office family. So I know how the post office works. But can I tell you, though, as we were watching election results, I don't know, all of last week, watching the vote counts, watch Donald Trump's lead in Pennsylvania just shrink and shrink and shrink and then go in the other direction, and then watching Joe Biden's lead increase and increase, and then we flipped Georgia blue. That was a big one. The post office delivered these ballots. The United States Post Office delivered this victory. Literally, they delivered it. There was also a mandated sweep of all post offices by a federal judge, and his name is Emmett Sullivan. He's an African-American judge. And he said every single post office is going to have to go and make a sweep to make sure there's no ballots hidden somewhere under a pallet. There's no ballots somewhere hidden in those coupon flyers that we all get that you can't opt out of. He required the mandated sweep of every post office, and additional ballots were found. It's not like it's sinister. It's just human error, and they're paper envelopes. They could be, if you've ever seen the back room of a post office, it looks like World War III, but it's organized chaos. But that organized chaos of the United States Postal Service, and that is why there was so much effort and energy put into discrediting and defunding the post office, especially by Louis DeJoy, who was selected to lead the post office in the Trump administration. He also was a heavy hitting Republican donor. They knew, that's one thing the Republicans have over us. They're clairvoyant. They can see way into the future. They know that if the United States Postal Service is going to have a heavy hand in literally delivering Donald Trump his defeat, well, let's make it more difficult. And I made note of it publicly whenever I could, especially when my mail was delivered after 9 p.m. one day. And then having a number of postal workers that are actually in the Forum Facebook group. If you're not a member, you should join. And they gave their firsthand account of what was going on at the post office. But let me just take this moment to thank them for delivering a Donald Trump defeat. But how the Democrats work together, because there was a big family argument when there was a conference call that took place. I think was it Saturday or maybe Friday, where Democratic leadership blamed progressives for shifting the narrative to the left and the defund the police movements and other things that gave some Republicans a little bit of pause in voting for Joe Biden, because the voters didn't necessarily want to see that, but these are good, healthy, progressive causes. But it scared some folks. And here's the difference. And this is where we're going to have to figure it out, because come Inauguration Day, we're going to have to be in a family and pose for the family photo on Inauguration Day, so the Republicans are afraid of the unity that the Democrats have. That is the only thing that we can present to them in which they actually can be intimidated, is a wall of unity. But if there are cracks in that wall, meaning the moderates want to go one direction and progressives want to go another, then Republicans are going to exploit that, and they're going to drill down and invest money in districts where moderates were more successful and progressives were not, and Republicans are going to have influence even on those Democratic leaning districts. I assure you they're going to do it, because remember, they have a level of political clairvoyance. They can see already past the year 2022. So while the Republicans have a field office in the middle of Bronzeville, in the middle of the African American Cultural Center in the city of Milwaukee, and they have a 3-year lease, they're not going anywhere. They're already planning for the midterm elections of 2022, and we need to as well. So pop your champagne, celebrate while you can, but we're going to have to figure out how Democrats, liberal and moderate and progressive and everything else, work together with an impenetrable level of cooperation amongst us. Posted an article saying that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, might quit politics because of how moderates are treating her and how moderates are talking to her. First and foremost, that's the problem. You don't quit. You figure out how to take the activism, which is the backbone of the progressive movement in this country. It's activism. It's in the streets. It's in your face. It's saying that we're tired of being paid too little. We're tired of essential workers only being called essential and not getting necessary pay. We're tired of crushing student debt. We're tired of corporations that get the bailouts and Main Street gets nothing. That is activism, and we need that. We need that in the streets, because what that does is it galvanizes more people, because there are more and more people of different races and cultures that are involved in one way or another, and how American capitalism can be dangerous, detrimental, and quite honestly, deadly. We need that level of activism. Here's where the moderates come in. The progressive movement that is activist in nature gets people fired up, gets them excited, gets them feeling like their issues don't fall on deaf ears, because they don't. That's not lost on us. We hear that too, and a lot of us experience it as well. But hang on a second. The moderates are there to strike the compromise with the devil. And I know you don't want to do that. You don't want to have to compromise with the devil. Politics requires it. If you just want to have the ultimate progressive wish list and agenda, then stay an activist, because we will need you to feed the center and the middle and even some Republicans what those details are from the street and from the grassroots. We need that. But once you get elected and you have 600,000 or 700,000 constituents, and if you run as a Democratic Socialist and you run as a progressive, more power to you. I'm glad you won, but now you have to govern. You cannot be an activist in conference committee. You cannot be an activist in the budget hearing. You have to strike a compromise, or you know what's going to happen? You lose everything. That is the adults in the room that have to stand up. You can't just stomp your feet, and if you don't get every single thing in the progressive agenda packed into one bill, the first bill, House Resolution number 1, you can't leave the room and say you might quit politics. No. You're just getting started. Pick one. Pick one this term. The next term, we get another one. Democrats only have so much political capital, especially living in a country where Republicans are likely to get 72 or 73 million votes all told. Joe Biden will creep closer toward 80 million votes, but you cannot forget that Donald Trump did better now. His brand of a detrimental, disgusting, and disbanded America did better in 2020 than it did in 2016. And he didn't do anything but ruin the country. He didn't build a wall. He didn't ban Muslims. He didn't do any of that stuff. And he actually performed better with voters, meaning that the progressive wish list, it needs to remain in place. In fact, it needs to add more items to it, but we have to pick one, because the amount of political capital, so that is the currency that we have to negotiate with Republicans to get our wish list implemented into actual policy, is limited. And you got to save about 40% of the Democrats' political capital for foreign policy. Because you know how much foreign policy that we're going to have? We're going to need a Secretary of State that can start rebuilding coalitions. We're going to have to get back into the Paris Climate Accord. The amount of foreign policy that we're going to need to get the United States a level of credibility again, so world leaders even talk to us, is going to take a lot of our energy. With that being said, we're not going to be able to implement every single part and piece of the progressive agenda, and that's going to make people very upset. But let me give you this. We can't implement every single part and piece of the progressive agenda in Washington. You got to do it at home. You defund the police at home. In the city of Milwaukee, there are a variety of different programs that we can get funding for that can reduce the necessity for calling the police every single time. Don't ask Washington to do it. We can do that right here. So all of that activism that feeds the progressive movement has a tremendous amount of power in cities and in counties around the country. And so what happens is you get this political springboard. If we can implement even meager progressive policies at the local level, then it gives the next level up a little bit more encouragement, our Democrats at the state level. So if they see it's working at the local level, they're easily going to adopt it and can also help fund it with state resources. This is an incremental process in which we have to be respectful and mindful of the fact that the Democrats at the federal government squeaked by. There's no mandate here. There isn't. From Business Insider, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told the New York Times in an interview that she might quit politics depending on the hostility of her own party towards progressive causes. Quote, "I don't even know if I want to be in politics," she told the Times. "You know, for real, in the first 6 months of my term, I didn't even know if I was going to run for re-election this year." The Bronx native said the Democratic Party has been hostile to progressives like Medicare for All and the movement for Black Lives. Externally, there's been a ton of support, she said, according to the Times. But internally, it's been extremely hostile to anything that even smells progressive. Moderates, especially those that stole districts back from Republicans, those in Congress, the Democrats would not have the majority that they have, and it's a narrow majority. We're only about 9 seats. In 2022, the Republicans are poised to take the House majority back and to rip the Speaker's gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hands. So if we're being foolish with this very brief moment of political capital that we have, the Republicans are going to steal it and probably never give it back. Activism is one thing. Governing is another. Moderates have to govern because those are the only ones that are willing to even have the conversation with Republicans. Joe Biden is an asset, not because of his history, not because of things that he did in 1994, but because he has formed relationships with every single Republican on the Hill, whether it was when he was a senator for almost 30 years or when he was in the Obama administration. He has relationships. And some of that straight talk you get from Joe Biden, he's going to be exactly like that when he picks up the phone and calls some of these Southern senators. That is what we need. Now, we cannot get an entire progressive wish list implemented into law at the federal government, but what Joe Biden can do to give some respect to the people that elected him, Black people handed him this victory, gave him the necessary delegates to be the Democratic nominee. And I say that very seriously because the progressive movement had 2016, and then they thought that they were cheated by the DNC, and progressives were, because the Democrats can't nominate a Democratic socialist. You can't nominate somebody that's not a Democrat. Just like the Republicans, no matter, even if their best candidate to win an election was a libertarian, the Republican Party would never nominate a libertarian to lead the Republican Party. It's self-destructive. And a Democratic socialist getting the Democratic nomination destroys the Democratic Party. But I know some progressives are out to do that because they can say the Democratic Party is corporate, it's bought and sold, it's the same as Republicans. Okay. But in the grand scheme of things, we got to put your big boy and big girl panties on. You got to govern. You got to govern with a level of consensus and compromise. It's going to be tough, but we're going to have to pick which agenda items take precedence because we only have a limited amount of time to get everything done. And I would say the first priority is the coronavirus. And I already know some of you are not going to take the vaccine, so we'll have that conversation, but not today. We're still celebrating today. Ocasio-Cortez, who handily beat extremely well-funded opponents, pushed back on that accusation, blaming the losses on deficient digital campaigns and the avoidance of progressive issues. In a tweet, she said some campaigns spent $0 on digital ads the week before the election. She also told the Times that she wants Democrats to stop looking at progressive causes as the enemy, and that if they don't, they're just setting up their own obsolescence. A little extreme, but when Brooklyn, New York elects an activist, that's exactly what she is supposed to be saying to maintain her electoral majorities in the single 1 out of 435 districts in the country. No one congressional district, whatever its agenda is, Democrat or Republican or more of a centrist leaning of that congressional district, should be the agenda for the whole country. Now, Bernie Sanders set this path forward in 2016. There weren't enough votes for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party itself for him to get the nomination. Cool. The DNC changed some rules because Bernie got cheated, but then Bernie Sanders tried it again in 2020 with different rules, with more people feeling like, there's a progressive movement that can really take root and a Democratic socialist can actually be the Democratic nominee. And guess what happened in 2020? Even when the DNC relaxed some of its rules, Bernie Sanders didn't have enough votes. He just didn't. Just like Donald Trump doesn't have enough votes. He doesn't. Bernie Sanders didn't have enough votes amongst Democrats. And I just need folks to understand that is what this democracy is about. We're standing on the fact that if you don't have enough votes, you don't win. Donald Trump didn't have enough votes. He didn't win. Bernie Sanders didn't have enough votes. He didn't win. That doesn't mean we're going to abandon him nor his causes, because what Bernie did is he sparked a lot of activism. He got a lot more people involved that otherwise never would have listened to an old funny duddy like Joe Biden. They certainly didn't listen to Hillary Clinton, and there's tremendous amounts of value in that. But where that value is strongest is at the local level. You want to defund the police in Chicago? Do it. You want to defund the police in Minneapolis? Do it. But expecting Joe Biden to have a national policy of defunding the police is asinine, and it's going to cost us everything from reasonable policy to maybe even a Supreme Court justice pick. So about a month ago, the progressives released what their agenda is for this upcoming 2-year legislative cycle and maybe full 4-year term of Joe Biden. President-elect Joe Biden, got to start saying that. And it's very simple, and it makes a lot of sense. But when we have a very limited amount of time and the weight of the world on our shoulders to reverse, Donald Trump did some things that we don't even know he did. There are things that he did legislatively or with executive orders that we didn't even see because he was somewhere spreading the coronavirus, and that's what got all the news coverage. And so there's only a limited amount of time, and Joe Biden's going to need a whole bunch of extra pens to sign all these executive orders just to reverse what Trump did, let alone the policy and the legislation and the budgets that are needed to move away from Donald Trump's reversals of American fortune. A lot of this is just going to be the economy. The amount of time that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have to get things on track is going to be about getting the economy back to where we won't have to give people $1,200 stimulus checks for the next 2 years. From Politico.com, the Black Lives Matter leaders, organized labor, progressive groups, and members of the House Democratic Squad unveiled their 2021 agenda. This was last week, Thursday, laying out, actually, no, this was in October 8th, a month ago. So last month, Thursday, laying down markers for how big a Joe Biden administration could go on coronavirus aid, economic relief, and more in the year 2021. Known as the Working Families Party's People's Charter, the 1,000-word proposal calls for universal free healthcare, a jobs program employing 16 million people, retroactive hazard pay for essential employees, and the reallocation of resources from policing toward education and other services. Some of that can be done. Jobs program for 16 million people. The Biden-Harris administration can do that. So check that one off the progressive wish list that can get implemented this term. Retroactive hazard pay for essential employees and a reallocation of resources from policing. One of those, yes. The other one, probably not, at least not at the federal level. So the retroactive hazard pay for essential employees could be in the form of additional stimulus that Donald Trump stopped talking about and Mitch McConnell said he was not going to even entertain until the new session of Congress. Check, we can get that. Reallocating resources from policing toward education and other services. Here's where it gets tricky. The federal government doesn't determine the city of Milwaukee or Minneapolis or Des Moines, Iowa, or LA's police budget. Local people do. That's why you vote for mayor. There's literally no other reason to vote for mayor than trying to tell your city leaders how you want policing to look in your own community. That's why you vote for mayor. And like to pave the streets and to pick up your garbage. That's it. It's cops, at least in Milwaukee. That's why you vote for mayor, policing. Now, what the federal government can do is reduce the amount of money they allocate to the DEA and take some of that budget, like incarcerating people still at the federal level for marijuana, which I'm not sure if we do. The laws have changed so much on the state level. There still may be a law. Well, if the DEA still exists and they're getting funding and they're the Drug Enforcement Administration, so there is heavy billions of dollars of funding that go into the DEA. Some of that can be redirected to the Department of Education, where we can begin to forgive some student loans. Check. We can get that done. And that's reasonable. Those can be accomplishments that Democrats, moderates, progressives can accomplish going into the midterm election that won't scare the country into thinking we're becoming socialist, Nazi, Germany, China, something, North Korea. That's reasonable. Let's see what we got for comments here. Oh, you guys are speaking lots of words via the comments on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, you should. Go to youtube.com and search the Forum 2. That is the Forum number 2, and hit subscribe, and you can talk with us. Karen Siegler, good morning to you. Gregory Boswell, good morning. Orvana Harris, good morning. Lisa Miller, good morning. Judy B, good morning. Tutu Reeves, good morning. Judy B says, although we've won the presidency, we've kept the pedal to the metal. I am now, quote, woke, and I am paying closer attention to down ballot races and plan to be a source of information to those around me. That is one thing that we all can do. Spread the gospel of good information, because we're still battling fake news here, which you can see its second election cycle. It has had an influence on voters. Fake news has. So provide truthful information whenever you can. And so don't provide truthful information from Donald Trump's Twitter account, because they flag like 12 of his tweets. That's false and misleading. How embarrassing for an ex-president to have your tweets flagged Good morning, Justin. That theory, it was progressive politics, was the reason we lost the House is nonsense. The reason House seats were lost was a combination of gerrymandered districts and record turnout. You got to split hairs in some of these districts, though. Sometimes it is an agenda that may go further than not further than the people. I think the people in this country are extremely progressive, but the people are not the voters. Did we even reach 70% voter turnout? Did we reach it? I don't think we reached it, even though we had like a lot of people vote and stuff. Like a whole bunch of people said, "Oh, I'm going to vote by mail." Like you had people in Arizona probably trying to come to Midtown. I want to vote at Midtown, but sir, you live in New Mexico. I don't care. The more people that vote, the better shot progressives have at their agenda at every single level. But I don't want to let progressives off the hook for not drilling down at the local level, because that's where activism is most powerful, right? You get 3,000 people, a movement of 3,000 people in the streets. You can influence like 2 aldermanic elections, but 3,000 people in the streets in just one city has little effect on a whole presidency or even on a congressional race. So there's ways in which the progressive agenda can bear fruit. Listen, and I got to say it a million times because every time I say it, somebody else hears it for the first time. Marcelia Nicholson, she is the chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. She is the most powerful legislator in Milwaukee County. It's 1 million people in Milwaukee County. That's a lot of people. She is a Democratic socialist. We did an interview with NBC News in like December or January. 30-minute interview that aired on Meet the Press and MSNBC and all over the place. Me and her are arguing about this same fact. And then most recently, she called into WNOV when I was there on election day. She was like, Joe Biden wasn't my first choice, or my second choice, or my third choice, or my fourth choice. Look, we get it. But the other thing that progressives don't have to do, because we know, and maybe they need everybody else to know, we know you don't like moderate candidates. And so when you say that you voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, don't put the asterisk next to it and say, well, I didn't want to. I don't want to eat my vegetables. I eat them. I don't want to eat my broccoli. We know. It's petulance. I didn't want to vote for him. Thank you for doing something you didn't want to do. You know how many days it was cold and snowing and I didn't want to go to work? Well, I guess not now because I work from my house. Sometimes there's stuff that we don't want to do. And so sometimes you don't want to go to work. Your job sucks. Your boss sucks. Management sucks. You don't make enough money. But does it do any good when you get to work and you punch in and you say, I really didn't want to be here, but I'm here anyway, right? We know that. We get it. And let me not sound cold and callous, because I understand being Black is this perpetual situation of hurry up and wait for things to happen to the Black community. And I would say to the progressives, welcome, because now you're kind of like Black people a little bit. Don't take that to your heads, because some progressives don't thoroughly understand the complications of race, and they think that with a sweeping agenda, they can, overcome, or we can overlook some of the issues that are deeply seated in race. It's some progressives that don't want to move into a Black neighborhood unless they can buy it. If you can't gentrify the Black neighborhood and make it not Black anymore, then they want to stay away from it as much as Waukesha Republicans do. That's not lost on me. We still love y'all. We still need your votes, but I'm watching you. Angel says you're right on point. Thank you. Justin says, look at the statewide races. They don't support the theory that it was progressive politics that lost. No, probably not, especially in Wisconsin. So the gerrymander is very important, but even if we had fair maps, and I don't know what fair maps look like, because if the Democrats had the opportunity to draw the maps, come on now. We got gerrymander maps in the city of Milwaukee. That's why Republican candidates, they got more votes in the city of Milwaukee than they did in 2020 than they did in 2016. Barely got 15% of the vote, even though they had huge efforts and they had outreach and they had money. They had an office, and still do, on the north side of the city of Milwaukee, and they were paying people to do outreach on behalf of all the Republican candidates and on behalf of Trump Pence. But they didn't even get remotely close, and that's a gerrymander in favor of Democratic districts. So even if we had fair maps, and the political agenda moved even further to the left, I don't know if that engages voters. It may engage more activists, it may engage more people, but does it engage more actual registered voters? I don't know. We're not going to have fair maps. Well, we're going to have a new definition of fair legislative maps by the time we get to draw maps again anyway. Douglas Dickerson said, "You're right, Sherwin. You don't quit." Well, I can't quit. Got work to do. Ron Harris says, "Good morning, Osage and borderline brilliant one." Ding dong, that orange witch with a B is dead. Don't underestimate Trump, because he is going to help Republicans get elected. Trump is going to be the biggest factor in the midterm elections than we want to believe. He ain't going away. He can't. He might go to jail, but he's not going away. He got too many votes. Now, I know we want to, like, oh, good, Donald Trump is gone. No, he ain't. He still has U.S. senators saying, oh, the election was stolen. The reason why Republicans supported all this voter ID and all these new restrictions on voting is so that if we had close elections, we could be confident that there was no voter fraud. And we let them do it. We let Republicans say, okay, fine, voter ID, and you have to live in your address for 28 days. And, college students can't use their college ID anymore to register to vote. We stood by, and that's fine, because the more regulation we have on elections, the more faith we can have in the results. So they can't claim voter fraud when they're the ones that created this modern system of elections in the first place that is overwhelmingly regulated. And Republicans are supposed to be the ones that don't like regulation because it's the man's foot on my neck. All these regulations are crushing business. Regulation also crushed the democracy when you make people have to jump through all these unnecessary hoops and hurdles to go and vote. Fair enough. That's the law of the land. In most places in this country, if not everywhere, you have to have an ID to vote. And then there's additional measures that were put in place as well to make sure there's no voter fraud, which there's essentially no evidence of. And when we do find it, when you look real hard, it's Republicans that vote twice, because they think that the Democrats are the ones that vote twice. They think they can get away with it because people will always look at the Democrats, and in Black neighborhoods and Black communities. I said it before, I'll say it again. I have enough trouble trying to get Black people to vote once. Nobody's going to prison to vote twice. Nope. Is Joe Biden worth going to prison for? The maximum penalty for voter fraud is it's at least a year. Who the hell is going to go to prison for a year voting for Joe Biden 2 times? Rob a bank, for God's sake. Well, don't rob a bank. But I mean, there's other crimes you can commit that are sexier than voting twice. What you in for? Well, I registered to vote twice. Oh, they beat you up right away. Dorian Higgins, good morning, sir. Karen Siegler says, I think Claire McCaskill blames AOC for pushing her on policies that ultimately had her lose her seat in Missouri 2 years ago. There's some personal beef going on. Because, AOC, she pulls no punches at her own party. Okay, cool. We're supposed to have a little arguing and debating as long as there can be a compromise at the end, but you can't make it so personal. And I say this, and even though they're a really bad example, where do Republicans that hate each other, because there's some Republicans that hate Trump. There's a few in the U.S. Senate, Susan Collins, I wouldn't say she hated him, but ultimately they fall in line. Where can we identify any public feuds amongst Republicans, even with never Trump Republicans that are in office? They don't feud publicly. We do. We're the Democrats sometimes are like Jerry Springer. I slept with your baby mama. I took moderates away from you. And then we throw a chair and it's on display for the whole country to see. We look like we don't have our shit together. I got something to tell you. You get a bunch of Democrats together and you put them on the Jerry Springer stage. You got AOC that comes out. You got Obama will probably be there. Eric Holder would join the stage lineup. Joe Biden would be there. Kamala Harris, I don't know what she's doing because she used to be a progressive, but then she had a bunch of progressive ideas in the Senate. Now she is the other half of the Biden administration. And then AOC comes out. I slept with all y'all baby mamas. And then a stripper pole comes out some kind of way and there's strippers. That's the Democrats. Republicans are just like the Phil Donahue show. Here's what, listen, I understand that there's a couple of disagreements. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a walk. We're going to stand up. We're going to stretch our legs and we're going to. Justin says, I totally agree with you, Sherwin, but one thing the Dems need to get better at is not starting negotiations from the center. Start left, then negotiate to the center. We agree, Justin. Finally, I don't like to argue with my moderator. Justin's the moderator of the forum Facebook group, who's better at it than me because I delete everybody. What? Who said that? Delete, block, ban. Oops, did I just ban my own mother? Sorry, ban, delete, block. Because we got to keep the debate from getting off track. No, I agree. You start from, that's a good tactic. But as long as the Republicans control the Senate, starting negotiations in the Senate, that's why a lot of our bills come from the House. And so I would say we do, because the House has passed a number of bills that sat on Mitch McConnell's desk. And I think that those negotiations did begin on the left. And guess what? They got through the House. We passed marijuana legalization. Does anyone even know that at the federal level? Like weed for everybody? You go to Walmart and get well, you can't now. But if it was up to the Democrats in the House, marijuana would just, you would have, you know how you have farmers markets now? And you can buy produce that people grow in the vacant lot of the inner city Black neighborhood that they gentrified, and then they can take the produce that they grew in old Miss Jones' house and they can sell it at a farmer's market, also in a Black neighborhood that brings people from Wauwatosa. Imagine if like decriminalized recreational marijuana would mean you could go and buy tomatoes and squash and onions and broccoli and weed at a farmer's market. The Democrats in the House passed a package of marijuana reform bills. The Senate didn't even hear them. So I think we do have an arm of the legislature that does begin its negotiations from progressive causes. But when you have to deal with the Senate, and that's why we can, the proof will be in the pudding here. If we can win the 2 runoff elections in Georgia, and as long as Donald Trump stays out there spreading Rona and has attention on him, then the Republicans are not going to get the attention nor the money they need. Because Donald Trump, if you go to his website, but don't go, I mean, go if you have to his website, DonaldTrump.com, the first thing they ask you for is a donation for the recount effort. You sucker. You're taking money away from Georgia, dummy. Stacey Abrams has not slept. And would she be a good addition to the Biden-Harris administration? She would. Would she be better as chair of the DNC? Yes. David Voltner asked me to try to get her on this program. Ooh, that's going to be hard. Everybody going to want to talk to Stacey Abrams. Maybe I can call my good friend Eric Holder. He probably has her cell phone number. Eric Holder, hey, Stacey, WYD. Melissa says, good morning, Melissa. Cool, keep bashing AOC while the rest of the world deals with the climate emergency, continues to leave us behind in healthcare, education, life expectancy, and every other marker of a rich nation. So her ideas don't address all of that. And here's the thing, she's newly elected. When I say newly elected, she got elected. And when she get 2018, the midterms, the first blue wave. Being an activist and defeating an entrenched Democratic incumbent who did take a lot of money from the health insurance industry, the guy she beat, I think his name was, I can't remember his name. Doesn't matter, she beat him. Going from activist to legislator is like going from assembly line to vice president of the company. Your rules of engagement are different. The boardroom is different. and the activist spirit that she has doesn't get as far at the negotiating table when it comes to policy as it does in the streets of Brooklyn. And that's what I'm saying, that the process is literally designed to be slow. It's like getting hired somewhere. I don't know, where would somebody get hired? What are the only things that are even open? Let's say somebody gets hired at the grocery store. And you're a grocery store person and you're an essential worker because we all go to the grocery store. I've totally reallocated my entertainment budget to just buying groceries. That's what I buy groceries. When I leave the house, I put on a hazmat suit and I go to the grocery store. Somebody gets a job at a grocery store and they're a cashier or they stock the shelves and they just got hired. They don't even know who else works there. They don't know all the middle managers. They don't know the owner. They don't know the franchisees. They just got hired, just started. And they come in as a newly hired grocery store employee. And maybe it's a grocery store chain that has been around for a very long time, but it was built to be durable. It was built to sell groceries in Wisconsin for many, many decades. It's built on solid ground and it doesn't change much. Every few years, every 5 or 6 years, they'll rearrange the aisles at the grocery store, but not much. They may carry more craft beer and more organic products, but they don't change all that much. And when they do change, people have a fit, even if the changes are incremental. But this newly hired person at the grocery store can say, this place sucks. This is not where the organic food needs to be. You need to have more natural light. You need to have more coffee that is grown in conflict-free areas. This grocery store is terrible. We need to change the entire grocery store. And if you don't listen to me, a newly hired grocery store employee that just got started, then all of you are the worst things in the world. You got to learn how the grocery store works, what makes it tick, who the people are, and have incremental influence at every single level. Then at some point in time, the grocery store belongs to you. Then you change it. But here's the problem. The time that it takes for someone to learn the ropes politically, to make deals, to form relationships, you might have to win 3 terms in the House before a single Republican even trusts you to where they would co-sponsor a bill from you or from your caucus and bring it to their chamber. It may take a lot of effort at just getting reelected, so you are much more established in that chamber and you can have the best progressive ideas. You can have the activist class fully supporting you and you get elected and they elect you again, you get reelected. Now you're getting more credibility with who? The other party. Democrats cannot lead like they're the only ones because the American people made it resoundingly clear we're not the only ones. There was no clean Democratic sweep, meaning that Joe Biden's mandate, while it is slight in that he needs to be a better leader than Donald Trump, the entire treasure trove of policies from Democrats was not accepted by the American people. Now, here's what the real test is going to be. How are Democrats going to do in Georgia? We can get the majority in the U.S. Senate, and with the majority in the U.S. Senate, progressives have a much better shot at getting more of their agenda items signed into law by Joe Biden. Or if there's a tie in the U.S. Senate, Kamala Harris has the ability to be the deciding vote. But what happens is by the time someone who comes in on a political climate of activism like we saw in 2018, and what I would agree is still here, even though every single progressive told you first how much they hate Joe Biden and voted for Joe Biden like it was going to kill them to vote for Joe Biden. And what I've been trying to say is no, not voting for Joe Biden and voting for Donald Trump, or worse, staying home. That would kill you faster with, real things like Corona. By the time someone who comes in with this wave of activism gets established in their chamber enough to where their proposals can be heard by the Republicans, and I know nobody ever wants to hear that we don't have to work with Republicans. That comes from people that don't know what government is. You can't go to work and say, I'm not going to talk to my manager because I don't like his political affiliation. I'm not going to work with you because I don't like your shoes. Oh, yeah. By the time they get much more established and they see how the company works, whether it's the House of Representatives, whether it's the county board, whether it's an alder person at the local level, where these progressive policies have a much better chance of getting implemented, what happens is they're not progressive anymore. The time that it takes in your political maturity, your on the job experience whittles away your activism because you see you have to be an adult and take a compromise, which means that everybody loses something and you lose some of that activist nature and you become a much more mature, much more laser focused on getting something passed. If you don't get everything in your wish list passed, everybody suffers. But if you can get something, willing to compromise on something, you ease the suffering just a little bit. Then you go on and you win your race for another term, and then you attack item number 2. If there was that same collective spirit of you have to have a level of patience. I know that the world is on fire. First of all, I'm middle-aged. I probably will be able to live before the earth explodes. Maybe. But for those younger than me, I will support. Just tell me what to vote for. Like for the younger, more progressives that are 18, 19 years old that literally have their world on fire and they're going to be drowning in student debt. You all put the candidates forward. And I just because Generation X is just like, whatever you guys want to do, it's fine. That's fine. Pour me a martini. It's whatever the kids want to do. We're going to let the kids do everything. We're going to be the coolest old generation ever. Just go ahead. Legalize the weed. You want to legalize what? Meth? Heroin? All right, well, go ahead. Just don't get hurt. We're just tell us who to vote for. Other than that, we're just gonna argue. Jay says the assumption can be made seats were lost because of the progressive message. Progressive voters is increasing, and if their policies keep being overlooked, the Dems will risk losing future elections. Whatever the progressive movement is, and I don't even know if it's a movement. I think it's a necessary part of the democratic structure in America, right? Just like evangelicals. Like I wouldn't call the evangelicals a movement. They're people that have a philosophy, that believe stuff. I don't believe their stuff, but they're a part of the Republican coalition. Progressives are a part of our coalition. They don't lead the whole party. Evangelicals don't lead the entire party. They're a part of it. And Republicans can strike an unusual compromise between those on the far right, including Nazis, and those that kind of don't like Donald Trump. Democrats are all or nothing. And it's our inability to compromise, not with Republicans, because that's why we hate moderates so much, because they do have an ability to compromise with Republicans. Our problem is we cannot compromise with ourselves, meaning that whatever the progressive movement is, it was not enough to get Bernie Sanders enough delegates amongst Democratic voters, especially in states where you have to declare a party affiliation to vote in that election. There's not enough. So it's not a movement. It isn't. In fact, there might be more people that would call themselves a progressive than actual voters. So it isn't a movement. It exists within the diversity of the Democratic Party. You know who else exists within the diversity of the Democratic Party? And the only time Joe Biden stomped his fist on the podium, did you see that? Did you see when he stomped his fist on the podium? He said, "Black voters brought me here. You had my back and I'm going to have yours." Stomp. Black voters have a different view of policies than the white. So there's a story I did years ago. Don't know where it is. Maybe I'll find it. I probably won't. I always say that and I never do. That the whiteness of evangelicals is like 90%, right? That section of Republican leaning voters that call themselves evangelical is 90%. The only thing, like 94%, the only other political movement that is as white as the evangelicals are progressives. White supremacy has a way of making people feel that once they've identified a problem, that we can fix it immediately. Black people have been trying to fix stuff immediately for a very long time. It took us 100 years to vote, to be able to, 100 years to vote. Now we swing elections, but let's not overlook it took us a century. I want people to understand that Black people were able to deliver victories for Joe Biden, either in the Democratic primary process or in Milwaukee or in Detroit or in Philly, because it took us 100 years to be able to vote. Once white people who are like largely culturally responsible for whatever America is realize that it takes a really long time. And I think that's some of the consternation, especially if you're one of those white people that feel bad for being white and don't feel bad for being white. Because if you feel bad for being white, then you ultimately are going to stop feeling bad for feeling white. And then you're going to get mad at the fact that you feel bad for feeling white because you're always teetering on fascism because whiteness allows you to do that and get 71 million votes. So don't be angry. Just have a better understanding. Jay says now using defund the police is dangerous verbiage and the need to figure out a different way of saying police accountability. So I can't speak for other cities because other cities might want more police. Other cities may have it figured out. Other cities may have found ways to reduce the number of in custody deaths, officer involved deaths, shooting deaths, turning off body cameras. There are cities that have figured that out. And so that is a very important part of like the tone of where American politics is right now, because especially with George Floyd's murder, which still is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. How Minneapolis, remember when Minneapolis came out, like the first thing Minneapolis did, and the world was watching Minneapolis because one of their police precincts burnt down, which we come to find out was a white supremacist that did that, but they blamed the left for it. Well, what is Minneapolis going to do? Because clearly they have a problem with policing. And the Minneapolis Council, like 7 of 9 members voted to disband the Minneapolis Police Department. First of all, they haven't disbanded anything. But I think from that moment of collective anger, we wanted to see what the city that experienced the most or one of the most egregious public displays of police murder was going to do. And Minneapolis was like, screw it. If cops are going to do this, we don't need them at all. And the rest of the country was like, screw it. We'll defund the police too. In certain places, certain political agenda items work. In other places, they do not. And by trying to take something that does not work, not for your people, but for your voters, because you see it somewhere else and you try to implement it with your voters in your congressional district or in your US Senate race, because you adopted something from another city, it's not going to work. You're not going to encourage more voters. And so where you begin your negotiations, and I would agree the Democrats need to begin negotiating their policies from the left, which we do in the House. That's a good place to start because that gives more room for compromise. But what you can't do is out-negotiate your actual voters. Here's what the voters are saying. Let's meet them where they're at, because Democrats can't afford to lose a single vote ever again in the history of ever. We can't. And we're on this seesaw, because if we don't go progressive enough, we're going to lose voters that didn't want to vote for this ticket anyway. So if we're not far enough left, we're going to lose those. But if we are in a position where we go too far to the right, or if we don't compromise enough, if we're not moderate enough, we're going to lose votes there as well. Eileen Seeger says AOC got on the national stage thanks to Fox Entertainment Network pundits. They saw her as a poster child snowflake and threw out fear of what the Dem Party will become. And it worked. I think it became a problem when Democrats listened to Fox News and how they were, because all Fox News is going to do is stoke fear. I just, for shits and giggles, put Fox News on some point during the weekend because I don't want to be exposed to the advertisers on Fox News, because even though you're watching it because it's ridiculous and you want to laugh at them, you're still, the longer you watch, the more you're seeing the advertisers in the different companies that are advertising on Fox News. And that's how they get you. The more ridiculous the content, the better, because it keeps people watching for longer. And then you get exposed to the advertisers. And then when you go to the store and you buy a Reese's Pieces cup, a Reese's peanut butter pieces, whatever. I think I combined two different candies in one. You hate Fox News. Oh, I can't believe these idiots on Fox News are saying this stuff. And then you see a commercial for a Reese's peanut butter cup. And then an hour later, like, I want some chocolate and peanut butter. And you go buy a Reese's peanut butter cup. You actually just funded Fox News for the day, for the afternoon. All right, guys, we're going to entertain more of this very lively debate in the Forum Facebook group. I think the Facebook group name is the Forum 2, or I don't know, something like that. Join, we can continue the discussion, because I think at some point we're going to have to figure it out. Congratulations on the Biden-Harris ticket. Congratulations on the 75 million voters that wanted a change in leadership in the White House. Let's use this as a springboard to work together and not to further divide our Democratic voters that have a diversity of views and opinions. So what I'm going to do now is I want to play you guys something that John Kennedy said in a speech in I think it was 1961. And he perfectly speaks to this moment. And hopefully Joe Biden will be able to embrace pieces of what John Kennedy saw, because he was a political clairvoyant that we had, and then they killed him. But if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can embrace some of the things that can root out the fascism that we were afraid of back in 1960, and I would argue up until 1991, we can be much more successful, not just on domestic policy, but on foreign policy as well. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day. And now here's a speech from John F. Kennedy from the 1960s.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Yeah.